The first rays of the morning sun slowly spread across a peaceful village where 12-year-old Aarav lived with his parents in a small house. Every morning, the village came alive with birds singing, farmers walking toward their fields, and children laughing on their way to school. Aarav watched all of it with a smile, but inside his mind there was always a storm. He dreamed of becoming successful one day. He imagined standing on a stage, making his parents proud, and proving that even a small village boy could achieve something extraordinary. But no matter how big his dreams were, his mind refused to stay focused. Every morning he promised himself, "Today, I will stay disciplined. Today I will finish my work before I play." Yet within minutes, another distraction stole his attention. A butterfly flying across the road, children playing cricket, birds building nests, or simply his own wandering thoughts were enough to make him forget every promise he had made. His mother often smiled and said, "Aarav, a strong body is useful, but a strong mind is priceless." His father added, "The person who controls his mind controls his future." Aarav listened politely, but he never truly understood those words. At school, his teachers noticed something unusual about him. Whenever they asked a question, Aarav almost always knew the correct answer. He was intelligent, curious, and quick to learn. However, he rarely completed his work carefully. During lessons, he looked out of the classroom window instead of paying attention. While other students revised their notes, Aarav imagined adventures in his mind. His teacher once walked over to his desk and quietly said, "You don't have a problem with intelligence, Aarav. You have a problem with discipline." Those words stayed in his mind for a few seconds before another thought pushed them away. Days passed exactly the same way until one Monday morning, when the class had a mathematics test. Aarav smiled confidently because he had already studied the chapter. As soon as the test began, he answered the questions quickly. Instead of checking his work, he looked around the classroom, watched a bird sitting on a tree outside the window, and smiled at the clouds floating across the sky. When the teacher announced that time was over, Aarav handed in his paper without reading it again. The next afternoon, the teacher returned the answer sheets. One by one, students celebrated their good marks. Aarav opened his paper with confidence, expecting one of the highest scores in the class. But the smile on his face disappeared immediately. Several answers were wrong because of small careless mistakes. He had failed a test that he was completely capable of passing. His classmates looked surprised because everyone knew he was one of the smartest students in the class. Aarav quietly folded the paper and walked home without saying a word. The road felt longer than ever before. For the first time in his life, he realized that knowledge alone was not enough. Something inside him was stopping him from becoming the person he wanted to be. That evening, he sat outside his house as the golden sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. The cool breeze moved through the trees, but Aarav hardly noticed it. He opened his test paper once again and carefully looked at every mistake. None of them happened because he didn't know the answers. Every mistake happened because his attention had wandered away. At that moment, he whispered to himself, "Maybe my biggest enemy isn't the world. Maybe it's my own mind." He folded the paper, looked up at the darkening sky, and felt something new growing inside him. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't happiness. It was a quiet decision to find a way to control the one thing he had never tried to control before, his own mind. That single decision would soon begin a journey that would change his life forever. 1 week passed, but the question never left Aarav's mind. Every morning, as he looked at the folded test paper hidden inside his school bag, he remembered his promise. He knew that if he wanted to change his life, he first had to change his habits. On the very next day, he woke up 15 minutes earlier than usual. The village was still quiet. Instead of rushing outside to play, he sat alone in front of his house and closed his eyes. At first, his thoughts jumped everywhere. He thought about games, food, school, and hundreds of random things. After only a minute, he opened his eyes and sighed. "I can't even sit quietly," he whispered. That small failure made him realize how restless his mind had become. Instead of giving up, he decided to try again the next morning. Every day he practiced sitting silently for just a few minutes. Some days were easy, but most days were difficult. His mind fought against him like an invisible opponent. Sometimes he wanted to quit and return to his old life, but every time he remembered the pain of failing a test he could have passed. One afternoon, while walking home, Aarav noticed an old man sitting beneath a huge banyan tree near the edge of the village. The old man watched the flowing river without saying a word. Curious, Aarav walked closer. The old man smiled and asked, "Why does your face look so heavy for someone so young?" Aarav told him everything, his dreams, his failures, and how his mind never listened to him. The old man picked up a small glass filled with muddy water and gently placed it on the ground. "Watch carefully," he said. They waited silently for several minutes. Slowly, the mud settled at the bottom, and the water became clear. The old man smiled and said, "Your mind is just like this water. If you keep shaking it with distractions, you will never see clearly. But if you learn to stay still, everything becomes clear." Those words touched Aarav deeply. From that day forward, he created simple rules for himself. He would finish one task before starting another. He would study for 30 minutes before touching any game. He would never let small distractions decide how he spent his day. The first few days felt impossible. While studying, he could hear his friends laughing outside. Every sound tempted him to leave his books behind. Sometimes he even stood up to run outside. But then he stopped, took a deep breath, and sat down again. Each time he resisted a distraction, he felt a little stronger than before. His parents quietly noticed the change. His mother smiled as she watched him complete his homework without being reminded. His father saw him helping around the house before going out to play. His teacher noticed that Aarav was finally listening during lessons instead of staring through the classroom window. Weeks later, another mathematics test arrived. This time, Aarav answered every question carefully. When he finished, he wanted to hand in his paper immediately, just like before. But then he remembered the old man's words about the muddy water. He smiled, took a slow breath, and checked every answer one more time. He found 3 careless mistakes and corrected them before submitting the paper. For the first time, he felt proud, not because he knew the answers, but because he had controlled his mind instead of letting his mind control him. Yet deep inside, Aarav understood that this was only the beginning. Winning one battle did not mean winning the war. The greatest test of his discipline was still waiting for him, and it would challenge everything he had learned. Few days later, the results of the mathematics test were announced. The classroom was completely silent as the teacher called each student's name. When he finally said, "Aarav," a bright smile appeared on his face. Aarav had earned one of the highest scores in the class. The teacher looked at him proudly and said, "This is not the victory of intelligence. This is the victory of discipline." The entire class clapped, but Aarav knew the real celebration was happening inside his own heart. For the first time, he had defeated the enemy that no one else could see. From that day forward, Aarav continued following the small habits he had built. He woke up early every morning, completed his responsibilities before playing, listened carefully in class, and reminded himself every single day that discipline was a choice, not a feeling. Some days were still difficult. There were moments when he wanted to skip his routine, waste time, or give up. But instead of waiting to feel motivated, he remembered the promise he had made to himself. He understood that successful people are not successful because they always feel motivated. They become successful because they keep moving forward even when motivation disappears. Month after month, Aarav's confidence grew stronger. His grades improved, his teachers trusted him, and his parents noticed a new light in his eyes. But the biggest change was something that could not be measured by marks or trophies. His mind had become calm. The same boy who was once controlled by every distraction had learned to control his own thoughts. One evening, Aarav returned to the old banyan tree where he had first met the wise old man. The old man smiled before Aarav could even speak. "I can see it in your eyes," he said. "You no longer fight your mind. You lead it." Aarav smiled with gratitude and replied, "I thought discipline would make life harder, but it has actually made everything easier." The old man nodded and pointed toward the river flowing peacefully beside them. The river reaches the ocean not because it is the strongest, but because it never stops flowing in the right direction. Those words stayed with Aarav forever. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills, he looked across the village where his journey had begun. The houses, the school, the dusty roads, and the fields were exactly the same. The world around him had not changed. The only thing that had changed was the person looking at it. Aarav finally understood that changing your life does not begin with changing your circumstances. It begins with changing your mind. Years from now, people would admire his achievements, but very few would know the real secret behind them. His success did not begin on the day he received high marks. It began on the day a 12-year-old boy decided that his mind would no longer control him. He would control it. Always remember this. Your mind is either your greatest servant or your greatest master. Every small habit you repeat today is quietly building the person you will become tomorrow. Discipline is not about being perfect. It is about making the right choice again and again, even when no one is watching. If a 12-year-old boy can change his future by disciplining his mind, then you can change yours too. The moment you stop making excuses and start controlling your thoughts, your future begins to change. Discipline your mind, and your life will follow.